I was playing Meteor Shower in Diablo 3 this season, the Tal Rasha set, and I wanted to make a Meteor Shower build or something similar, and that's basically what Book Smash is. So this build is all based around Book Smash, is where all of our damage most of our damage is going to come from. There's going to be some shenanigans with Chrono Puncture as well, but is the vast majority of our damage, and it's kind of what everything is built around. But before we get into the skills too much, I want to talk about the Reaper that we're using, because it's kind of a weird one in the way that the builds work, because we're using the primordial version of the Staff of the Giant Slayer. You could use the normal version too. The main difference is that you'll have to put attack speed on your gear instead of getting it from your Reaper. And since you get so much from this Reaper, like I've seen 200% attack speed pretty commonly. There's not really a downside to using the primordial version, so it takes a little bit longer to get, but I'd say it's worth it. If you don't want to farm it, that's fine, but eventually I think you're going to want it anyway. Frees up stats on our gear, which we are going to be doing a lot of in this build, which is kind of fun. The other big thing about it is you get this 350% buff to all your damage, basically. Every time you hit something, you get a stack of Enfeeble on it, and each stack, once you've got it all the way maxed out, gives you 35% extra damage against them, stacking up to 10 times. That's a lot of extra damage, and it's a multiplier on top of everything else, so it adds up really, really fast. And you're not really actually getting that much Reaper damage from it. Our base damage stats are actually really, really low on this. They could maybe be a little bit higher, but you don't really need them super high, because we're going to just get a lot of huge percentage increases to damage like this one. This also gives us a bunch of damage to elites, and whenever you kill an elite, you basically nuke the whole field. You nuke everything that has taken in damage from you in the last, like, ever that's still alive, which is really, really, really strong. And you'll see at the end of your runs these huge, like, billion points of damage, instances of damage that happen because of them, because it's just a really big damage calculation all at once and clears the whole room, basically. The second effect, whenever you deal damage to an elite enemy with a skill in your primary or secondary slot, the same damage is dealt to a random nearby enemy. Doesn't really do that much, because you're going to basically kill elites in like 3 or 4 hits. And then once the elite dies, everything else that you've dealt damage to is going to die as well. This would maybe be a little bit better if you were doing like a whirlwind build or something, and you were just going straight for the elites and then trying to use this damage, taking a whole bunch of times to kill off a bunch of other enemies. But it's kind of weird, because there's a hard cap on how much damage you can get out of it. And since we're going to be doing so much in like a bunch of big hits as opposed to a ton of tiny hits, it makes it so it'll basically just kill off a couple enemies early for us, but it doesn't do that much. Especially the stronger the Reaper gets, kind of the worse that part of it gets. So okay, so let's get into skills. And remember, when we're looking at these, that everything written here is like a quarter of what it should actually be, because it's going to get multiplied by 350% when it hits the enemy. These are already going to be decently high numbers, and it's going to be way, way, way more than that. On this first upgrade, I don't know, what are these called? Passive abilities on our Book Smash. We're going to take the Ancestral Strike damage. We're going to be doing a lot of Ancestral Strikes, and it's just a lot of extra damage. This AoE effect is also pretty good. It makes the game run a little bit worse, and really all it does is it applies a bunch of stacks of Enfeeble to enemies, which is nice, but we're going to be able to get that other places too. So I've been using the Ancestral Strike damage. This isn't maxed out yet. There's still a few of these upgrades that I need to get. It's like 3, 4 more. So it should end up at 202% Ancestral Strike damage, which is pretty nice. We take the Silence, so we're going to be silencing a whole bunch of stuff, which is nice crowd control. For this one, you could kind of take either one of these, honestly, any one of the 3. I've been using the Accidental Casting, partially because it's just fun and it puts a bunch of AoEs all over the place. We're pretty much always going to have 3 or 4 temporal emblems whenever we cast our Book Smash, which means we're going to be getting a whole bunch of Rift Novas, and Rift Nova will buff your remnants and does pretty decent damage, and it's kind of our replacement for this AoE, so it hits a whole bunch of enemies. You could, if you decide you don't want to worry about it, you could just get extra book smash casts. Our remnants are doing extra damage because we are the phlegmatic caster, and we're going to take this. We'll look at this later, but our remnants only do 20% less damage instead of 50. So our remnants are pretty strong. This gives you a whole bunch of extra book smashes. This one gives you Rift Novas instead. So whichever way you want to go. You don't really need the cooldown reduction, but if you are finding that you're dying when there's only a few enemies left because you can't cast fast enough, you could take this. You know, it makes a pretty big difference, but you're going to get a ton of attack speed from the Reaper once it's primordial. Maybe you use this when you're leveling it, but I like this one, and it looks cool. Here, we don't really want elemental damage. We're not doing any elemental damage. This actually is kind of bugged, or it was at one point. I haven't really tested it since then, but we don't need time lock that has no duration and then you can't cast. It's just really janky. Take this one. We're going to be getting a whole bunch of inner fires. We'll get 10% extra damage for each one. We should be able to get close to 20 inner fires around us at any time, so that's 200% extra damage on our book smash. It's pretty nice. And then this one I just take melee recast chance, and you get a couple extra book smashes. We're also going to use chrono puncture. This is where we'll get time lock, and it's some nice crowd control. I don't really like these. They just kind of lag the game, and they do elemental damage anyway. Here we're going to take armor. This is nice when you're building up your Thornbite shield, which we'll be using, but eventually you could probably swap to more attack speed or get a little bit extra damage. This resets every time you cast something else, so you're really only going to get like 5-10% damage. It's not going to be a big deal. You can just kind of leave it on armor. None of these are going to make a huge difference. For this row, I don't know which of these choices is better. This will make your Chronopuncture remnant casts do 8x damage, which is nice. This will make them happen more often and hit more enemies, but they'll do less damage. So it's hard to feel out which one of these is more impactful. I would guess the more remnants you're casting, the less this one matters, because the main thing with this is getting it more often. So if you get a whole bunch of remnants, this one's probably pretty sweet. This row doesn't matter at all. They're just gonna lag the game more than it is without them, and they don't do any damage for us. Here we're gonna get melee recast chance to get remnants of Chronopuncture. Remember, these do 5,000% of Chronopuncture's damage, plus we're getting another 60% here. They do a decent amount. They'll also get buffed by the Rift Nova ability if you take that for another 100% increased damage. I don't know if that's a multiplier or additive, but it's gonna help regardless. So that this will be doing anywhere from like 5,060 to 10,000% of Chronopuncture's damage. I'm not sure how those all add together, but they'll be doing extra, which is nice. And then for specialization, we're gonna take this one. The teleport is probably the strongest actual skill to use of the three of these, and this one has really good abilities too. I'm using extra Slorm Find until I get enough Slorm to max out all my skills. So this is staying on for a little bit, and then I'll put on good strike damage. This is decent for some extra mana regen. This is pretty nice because it basically means that you don't have to roll mana leech or mana on hit or mana regen or anything on your gear. You just get life leech once and you're good to go on both stats. This is where we're getting extra remnant damage. This ability is cool because we have a bunch of inner fires and they're all going to be circling around us, but it doesn't make that big of a difference really to your damage. It does make it so that you can use them to get stacks of Enfeeble really quickly on certain enemies if it makes a big difference, but it's pretty minor. Temporal Clones not being able to get hit or targeted is nice because they will stay on the board for longer. You could also use this one to get some like crowd control sort of, but I didn't find it's very useful. Here you can sort of use either of these. You can get up to 4 emblems instead of 3, which is nice because it means that you're having higher chance to cast these Novas or the Book Smashes, either one. And also better multicast, but Ancestral Strike chance is also nice. I've been back and forth. They both feel good. Ancestral Strikes are going to give us more damage, obviously, and they're also going to proc our Reaper runes, so you can kind of play around with this, see how you feel with it. And then for our last one, we're going to get a whole bunch of remnants of Arcane Clone from our Temporal Clones, or Arcane Missile from our Temporal Clones when we're teleporting around. I wouldn't worry about teleporting a ton to get this, but it can be useful. You're going to want to put on just this row. You just want time lock on your arcane missiles. That's really the only thing that matters. And then just whatever gives you the highest damage values over here, because that's what your remnant damage is going to be calculated off of, pretty sure. This is what the Rift Nova tree is going to look like. When you cast Book Smash, all your emblems are going to go to Obliteration, which means that the Remnant of Rift Nova should be scaled up by 3 or 4 times 30% damage. So this is pretty nice to get more damage. This gives you more remnants. This makes them apply the vulnerability. So these are all nice, but none of it's super crazy. If we're back in here, Reaper Runes. We're going to take Ancestral Strike chances to proc it and the Pagan Effect rune. This makes it take longer, but you get more value per Ancestral Strike in the end, I think. And then I use the Bygorth Thornbite rune to get a whole bunch of damage protection, basically extra health. And then once I feel like I have enough, if I'm around like 2 or 3 million shield, I swap over to the Rune of the Nimble Warrior, which just gives us extra damage and crit strike chance, crit strike damage, Ancestral Strike chance, Ancestral Strike damage. So this is nice once you feel you're not going to get one shot or anything, and then you put this back on whenever you're lower or whatever. For Ancestral Legacy, we really just care about the Shadow Imbue. These don't do anything for us. You can hit the button for this one. 30% raw damage and 55% critical strike damage is nice, and I just have it bound on Q, so it's really easy to hit all the time whenever it's up. It's nice. It's not huge, but the 50% is a way bigger deal because it's another multiplier on everything, and it makes your book smashes look really cool too. For gear, I'm actually going to do this in Slorm Planner. If you don't know about this website, it's a really cool build planner for Slormancer. I'll link this build in the description, and you can make copies and create your own builds in there. Technically, I've made some adjustments in here. All I did is I would put on the legendaries that I would wear if I had them. I don't have a couple pieces, and I would make a few changes. Basically what we want as far as stats go is crit strike chance, ancestral strike chance, inner fire chance, and some I think I have some melee recast chance somewhere. You probably want like 1 or 2 melee recast chances too. Yeah, I got some here. And then you just want like evasion everywhere you can get it. And then if you have empty slots, put on armor, LE resist, raw damage, kind of whatever. I think what I would do for my head is probably Faith of the Ancients. This makes it so that in theory you don't need this skill anymore. So you could get that extra totem increased effect, which is going to buff the damage from these guys casting arcane missiles. It's not going to make a huge difference, but that's probably like the optimal build. That's like the last legendary I would worry about getting, I think. Actually, I wouldn't even get one on my cloak, so that's a lie. It's like the second to last. For our neck, this is basically essential in order to play the build. None of the rest of these do anything for us anyway, but this is like the most important one. Every time you quit, you're going to get a whole bunch of extra book smashes. They can all do ancestral strikes and stuff too, so it's just like 8 times damage whenever you crit. Really nice. Reaper damage, extra crit strike chance multiplier here on enemies the first couple times we hit them, or probably just the first time. You could also take Echoes of Villainous. This might be more consistent. I haven't tested it, but it seems like it should be good. I mean, it's 25% extra damage. It just takes a couple seconds, so it's kind of weird. Either one of those is probably fine. They're not going to make or break the build. Here you definitely want Life Leech. None of these really do anything. This seems tempting, but I feel like it would not actually be very good. It's probably super laggy. So you really want the Life Leech. And once you get it, you can probably roll Life Leech off your gloves for Ancestral Strike chance too. So this is what you want. It's like to have it look like this. I don't have this effect yet, but I do want it. For your chest, I would use, or I am using, Indomitable Mountain. If you feel like you can get enough shield fast enough without it, probably the Battle Mage Mantle is decent, although I feel like it probably doesn't proc that much, but then you'd just be getting more Rift Novas all the time. Just extra damage. The rest of these aren't really... If you're going to take a defensive one, take Indomitable Mountain. If you're not, I guess I'll take the Rift Nova one, but it's not that crazy. I don't think any of these are worth it on this. So we're not doing overdrives. I find that this screws me a lot of the time because I have so much life that it doesn't really matter when I take damage, but I run out of mana like instantly, and then I just can't cast any of my skills. I can't teleport out, and then I get CC'd and I die. This doesn't do anything for us. You could take this for more gold, but it probably lags the game, so I would just not have a legendary effect. It's not worth it. This, I would say, probably depends on if you're taking Ancestral Strike Chance or Phlegmatic Scholar. If you only have 3 emblems, you're probably gonna get them all back to Temporal in time for your Book Smash to have maxed out Temporal emblems for maximum damage. It might still be worth... I'm not sure how much these Rift Novas really do, but it might still be worth it to max out this to use it. The other one I would use is Sarusiel's Pact for the stagger damage reduction, because we're going to be getting rid of it with Ancestral Strike Chances pretty quick. That's basically just like 20% damage reduction. But the Emblem Manipulator is pretty fun. For rings, you want to work on getting a Gaslock as Conquest as quick as possible. This is what's getting us all of the extra inner fires. And remember, everyone is 10% damage increase for Book Smash. So this is 140% damage on Book Smash right there. It's just, that's free damage. For other ring, I don't have one yet, but you probably want Replica of the Past. For more Chronopuncture, Remnants, the other rings don't really do anything. So that's probably the best one to take. It's pretty low priority. Most of these legendaries are pretty low priority. The only one that really matters is this one. And the rest are all nice. Every single one makes you stronger, but they don't make or break the build. This is like essential. Same thing here. I mean, I think you could also do the momentum boots. This would give you just like a little bit of a AoE push whenever you time warp, which you'll be doing pretty often. I haven't used it, so it's hard to tell how it would feel. These are good. The only tricky thing is that you don't really want to be in a situation where they are helping you out. You're going to have like 3 million shield most of the time. So if you ever end up in a situation where your health is at like 1% or something and you're getting a huge multiplier here, you're kind of screwed already anyway. So they're okay, but we're putting so much into the shields that if you roll something else, I wouldn't worry that much about it. This is probably fine. As far as attributes go, I just have basically everything into evasion for the evasion multiplier, which increases our armor and everything as well. You can see this is our Wrath 10 damage reduction. It's pretty solid. This also gives us crit strike chance and a couple other kind of nice things, melee recast chance, but it's mostly just for the evasion multiplier at the end. Get some ancestral strike chance, get some damage, turn your armor into elemental resist, and you know, we're decently tanky. This is mostly defensive stuff. Nothing huge going on here. So generally, as far as gameplay goes, during runs, I would just hold down left and right mouse button all the time for extra, you know, just quick cast everything all the time. You're gonna hit your button for extra raw damage and extra critical strike damage on cooldown. I think it's Burning Shadow, right? Yeah. You can teleport every once in a while, especially if you need to get out of CC or anything like that. And you'll get your mages to do a little bit of casting for you. And then you basically just want to like, kill elites as fast as you can. And that'll kill everything around you too. So if you don't see any elites, you know, you just cast and stuff will die pretty quick. It's not going to be like insta-death for everything, but you're going to be pretty tanky too, so you can kind of just run through everything and cast as you go, and everything kind of just falls apart. You do have to kind of slowly build up stacks, especially in the smaller groups, and that is where having your inner fires go right around you is pretty handy, but that really is not going to make that big of a difference. You can see if you turn this off, let's turn this on instead, they kind of go like all over the place, so then they're going to hit more enemies faster, but it doesn't feel like it makes a huge difference. And it looks cool to have it on, so we leave it on. See, the elites just kind of die when you hit them. You get crazy damage to elites because you're getting it every time you kill enemies, and you have a whole bunch by default, and it just, then they get the 350% on top of that. It's kind of nutty how much damage to elites you do. So you really want to take advantage of those when you get them, because they're basically just like an extra damage multiplier to throw on everything else, because that damage goes on to other enemies too. So we get our highest damage dealt, 450 million, even though our highest ancestral damage is only 24. This damage, I think, is also capped at the health of the enemies that you're killing. You can get this number really high in the Forge because you can get enemies with really a ton of health and like really max it out. As far as the forge goes, though, I would actually generally take the upgrades that give enemies more damage, because as long as you can kill them before they hit you, that doesn't really matter. Giving them more health makes them take longer to kill, and especially as there's more and more enemies and there's more and more ground effects and stuff going on, that becomes really dangerous. So I would generally give them damage and attack speed and stuff, and then just kind of take whatever cataclysms you're most comfortable with. The ones that don't apply extra like effects that you have to watch out for are generally pretty safe and they don't lag the game as much, so that's where I would go. And that's pretty much the build.